St. Stephen's Episcopal Church is named after the first Christian martyr. It is located at 119 Main Street, Millburn, and is an historic gem. When the population of the community was only in the hundreds, the first service of the Congregation of St. Stephen's was held in the public schoolhouse in 1851, a site now occupied by the Schoolhouse Plaza building. A History of the Church by James Elliott Lindsley notes that it may be said St. Stephen's is the oldest existing corporate body in Millburn and is the oldest religious body in continual existence. When the church was founded in 1851, it was the only Episcopal parish in southern Essex County. Very soon, other parishes were established in nearby towns. This remarkable growth was partially due to the settlement of many people brought into New Jersey by the Morris-and-Essex Railroad. In the spring of 1853, Mr. Israel Condit, whose hat manufacturing patent fostered the industrial growth of the town in the mid-1800s, and who is known as the father of Millburn, offered the parish land on Main Street in order to build the church. The church was opened in 1855 and was designed by genius John B. Priest. Priest wrought a splendid example of American pointed Gothic, sometimes called Carpenter Gothic. Now white, the church was originally painted in tones of beige to resemble Gothic stone. The slate roof has an ecclesiastical pattern. The symmetry beneath is decorated with quatrefoil windows symbolizing the cross. Some of the stained glass windows were donated by local architect Joy Wheeler Dow, who worshipped at St. Stephen's. The church is not a New England church on the green. Rather, the High Church founders, proponents of the Oxford movement, wanted a building related to the medieval church, and newly fashionable American Gothic seemed appropriate. A very important aspect of any church in medieval England was its architecture. Theory was that the more beautiful and ornate the architecture, the more the building would be seen as praising God. An architectural feature of medieval churches were its rather small windows admitting little light. The reason for the small windows was because the architects realized that if they opened up large windows, the walls would be unable to support the weight of the heavy roof. In order to support the roof of the church, medieval architects scattered large pillars throughout the buildings. In this way, the weight of the roof was dispersed and the walls did not bear the entire weight. The supporting oak timbers for St. Stephen's Church were hewn from trees felled on or near the site. We do not know anything of the original altar in St. Stephen's Church, but the present altar was set in place around 1869. Dating to 1848, it is from Grace Church in Newark and is probably the oldest altar in continuous use. In 1870, a Johnson organ was purchased and it remained in service for many years. Today, the church organ is from German master organ builder Rudolf von Beckerath. It is fortunate that through the years, St. Stephen's Church has only been slightly altered. If any of the original builders were to return to us, they would readily recognize the church today. Only a few changes have been made. Electric lights have been added, some windows have been removed. But for the most part, the people of St. Stephen's, happily, did not have the means to modernize its church at a time when many other fine parish churches were undergoing drastic and disastrous changes in the later Victorian and Edwardian eras. Because of this, the church retains lines and feelings which make it more and more appreciated as a significant example of rural wooden Gothic architecture at its best. The church was ready for use in the summer of 1855. Income was derived from pew rents. The war between the states was imminent, but optimism prevailed at St. Stephen's and the church was enlarged and embellished when 2 western bays were added in 1859 to 60. Members of the church included well-known local families such as the Whittinghams and Renwicks. Another familiar sight in Millburn at this time was elegant Oakey Hall. Mr. Hall had assisted Boss Tweed in the corrupt administration of New York City and lived with his family in semi-retirement in Short Hills. The Halls were members of St. Stephen's. One of the church's mistakes was the reliance upon only a few people for the bulk of church support. Money problems resulted, and within 10 years the church had 4 rectors. It was thought that if a rectory could be built for the rectors of St. Stephen's, some of the greater problems of the parish would be solved. The architect of the rectory was C. Harrison Condon. It is worthwhile to pause and consider this house, which was built in 1868 and which became a landmark in Millburn. There were 2 other local houses which were built at the same time as the rectory. The first, the Richard Whittingham House, was also designed by C. Harrison Condon. It was raised in 1957. The other house was that of the Campbell family and later became the Chanticleer restaurant. The original designs for the rectory called for a basement kitchen, but this was impractical because the Rahway River across the street often flooded. The public rooms of the rectory were built in the spacious manner of the day. There was a separate door outside provided for the study, and steps from both ends of the side porch gave easy access to the door. Built in 1868-69, the rectory is a pointed Gothic style with a gabled roof and lancet windows that complement St. Stephen's. The rectory was probably painted in colors similar to those on the church. Barge boards were carved with quatrefoils. Tudor chimneys, paired side gables, horizontal window trim, and pendants illustrate the whimsicality of the style. Fortunately, the rectory has not lost its character and charm with the passage of years. There are new floors in the first floor, and the woodwork, once stained dark, is now white. The mantelpieces have been removed from the upstairs bedrooms, and unfortunately, the window blinds and original slate roof with its ecclesiastical designs have gone. The house enjoys all the conveniences of modern living, and at the same time retains much of the atmosphere of the past. Again, it is a beloved landmark in Millburn. The third parish building was Parish Hall. Built on Church Street about 1897, it was sold and subsequently repurchased. It was moved across the street and attached to the church. A nursery wing was attached to the old Parish Hall about 1954. It was expanded in its current state in 1961. Another important event at St. Stephen's in the 19th century was the founding of St. Stephen's School in 1870. But as public education in the township improved, the school was discontinued. Today it operates as a preschool. Shortly after the church was built, the St. Stephen's Cemetery was established about 1859-1860 to provide a burial site for the people of Millburn as well as for the members of St. Stephen's Church. The cemetery is located on 8 acres of land given by Israel D. Condon, who established himself once again as a generous benefactor of St. Stephen's. The first act of the cemetery committee was to grant Mr. Condon a large family burial plot. The cemetery is located across the street from the high school, the entrance marked by 2 stone pillars. The plaque on the gate that frames the entrance to the cemetery notes that St. Stephen's Gateway was the gift in 1936 of Edward S. Pettigrew, who lived in Short Hills. Mr. Pettigrew embellished the lush property with one of the finest examples of landscaping in the township and trucked in carloads of rhododendrons from the Carolinas. A great many locally and nationally important figures are buried in the cemetery, including members of the co-founding Condon and Hartshorn families, American bass Jerome Hines, Paper Mill Playhouse co-founder Frank Carrington, Broadway actress Annie Russell, and many more. Just inside the cemetery gate is another historic treasure, which is one of only 22 buildings featured in the book To Grandfather's House We Go by New Jersey illustrator Harry Devlin. Devlin notes that the Little Gothic Variation House is by one of America's greatest architects, James Renwick, who went on to build St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. Many Renwick family members are buried at St. Stephen's, including James Renwick's nephew William, who worked in his uncle's New York firm for a while. William was also an artist and landscape architect, and was the landscape architect for Greenwood Gardens located in Short Hills. His ground grave marker is one of the loveliest in the cemetery. This little house, now referred to as the caretaker's cottage, was the location for the discovery of children's clothing dating to the late 1800s. The chapel at Short Hills, a mausoleum, was built in 2002. Both the cemetery and mausoleum are open to people of all creeds. St. Stephen's Cemetery was established as a burial place for all families in the community. Its Victorian charm has been maintained as much as possible and is a place of beauty where many come for quiet reflection. St. Stephen's is one of the historic treasures in Millburn Township. We encourage you to visit and experience its beauty and rich history.